Welcome to the subject of statistics for the class 11th English medium, the chapter 1 collection of data by Vitan sir. Uh, Last time we studied in the last tutorial the population and sample. What is population? What is sample? Then types of data, that is numerical data, non-numerical data, quantitative data, qualitative data, then the methods of collecting data, that was direct inquiry, indirect inquiry, which we are going to study right now, but the primary data and the secondary data, and their subtypes, and then the difference between the primary data and the secondary data. Now this time we will be discussing in detail the direct and indirect inquiries. Now, we will start with the direct inquiry. As you can see that when an investigator himself or an enumerator appointed by him personally goes into the field and collects the data, it is called direct inquiry. As we know, direct and indirect both are the part of primary data, and we know that the primary data means collecting the data for the very first time. Then the person who needs that data, he himself or he appoints another person who is acting on behalf of himself, goes into the field and collects the data. That is the direct inquiry method of collecting primary data. Here investigator or enumerator comes into the personal contact of the respondents. That means he personally contacts these respondents. As you can see in the picture here, a person is collecting data from three-edged persons directly. So that's called the direct inquiry. Now the data obtained in this method becomes a very reliable data, because we have obtained it our own selves. We are not collecting it from someone else, but we are collecting it from by our own self. So naturally we can trust ourselves and it becomes reliable. So direct inquiry is where a person collects the data for himself by himself. Now the merits of this method: number one, the data obtained by this method is accurate and reliable. Also, due to the face-to-face interviews with respondents, enumerators can solve any question or doubt or any confusion by giving proper explanations while asking questions, collecting data. If the respondents have any kind of query, doubts or any question, we can directly answer them properly, so that we can collect an accurate data and they don't refuse to give us the data. So that is an advantage of the direct inquiry. By personal interview, enumerator sometimes gets supplementary information. Here the supplementary information means the extra information. That means it is not always necessary that we ask what we are supposed to ask. Sometimes by talking with the respondents, we may ask some additional questions to get more clarity on the data we are collecting. That is possible in one-to-one personal interviews, personal queries. By questionnaire or that, we can't do this kind of things. So that is an advantage of the direct inquiry. This method is much better when the field of inquiry is limited. That means when the field, geographical field, numerical field is limited. When we have less people to inquire, when we have less number of units to survey, we can do it personally. But when it is more, it becomes a bit difficult. Sometimes when respondents are unwilling to give particular type of information, the enumerator can get such information indirectly by asking supplementary questions and giving assurance against the misuse of the information provided by them. Now here it means that sometimes it does happen that people don't want to answer us. At that time, either we can assure them of the safety of their answers, or we can talk with them to create a trust among ourselves. We can ask some other questions to get indirect data from them. There are many ways which we can apply once we are in front of a person. Here telephonic interviews or emails or messages becomes difficult, but when we are in front of a person, we can talk with them, create a bond, create a trust and get our answers, which is only possible in the direct inquiry method. The disadvantages of this method: number one, that this method requires more time, more number of enumerators, and the field of inquiry is very wide. It becomes very difficult. When the wide field of inquiry is there, let's say the whole state or a whole nation is there, it requires too much time, too many number of people, and the cost of that is very high. This method is more expensive, as I just say. So the information collected by this method may be less reliable if the enumerators are untrained. If we send untrained people into the field, they don't know how to ask questions, they don't know how to create trust, they don't know how to get the desired information. Naturally we can't get the work done. So it is a bit difficult method, but also an effective method. Method of collecting primary data is the indirect inquiry. Now, when direct sources does not exist, or when the field of inquiry is very large and not enough time to contact personally, or when the information is complex or very difficult or very technical information, or when the cost is unbearable, the cost incurred is unbearable, which we can't bear. In that cases, the investigator contacts an organization or a person capable of conducting inquiries and gets relevant information from such organization or person. That means when we don't have some sources, we can't go there. For example, right now there is a lockdown in the country, in many countries of the world, and at that time I can't leave my home and get the data from the people personally. So direct source does not exist when the inquiry, the field is very large, so I can't go everywhere in the time given. When information is very complicated, which I can't understand because I may not have technical knowledge, or when the cost is so huge that I can't spend that much money, at that time I will contact the organization which are an experts of their respective fields for collecting data, or the persons who has that kind of a technical knowledge, or they have the power to go there and get the information for me. So that is called the indirect inquiry. In the indirect inquiry, I don't go personally anywhere, I don't send enumerators, I give the contract to a third party. That means it's kind of an outsourcing thing, that I collect information with the help of the third party instead of the enumerators. That means I give the contract of collecting information to someone else for me. Of course, it is primary data, but it is called indirect inquiry. Now we will check out the merits and demerits of this method. The advantages: number one, this method is most suitable when the field of inquiry is very wide. When very wide field of inquiry, the whole state, a nation, or some nations, all the world, indirect inquiry is the best method. When a respondent associated with inquiry is not willing to give information, this is the only useful method to collect the information. That means when sometimes respondents are not willing to give information, so what we can do, we can send in persons to whom he will give the information. Sometimes we don't know them, they don't trust us, but we may send some people whom they trust. So that way indirect inquiry becomes useful. It involves less cost, time and energy. It is very useful for departments of government to collect various types of information. Government uses indirect method. No, Narendra Modi doesn't go home to home to collect the information. Of course, they hire people, they give work to institutions to do this for them. Disadvantages of this method: number one, when individual or organization associated with the task of providing information have any prejudices or biased attitude, the information becomes less reliable. That means the people we have hired or the institutions we have hired have some prejudiced or have some bias. That means they have some mindset already that we only want to do this much, so they will not do what we ask them to do, they will only do what they want to do. That way we get a less reliable, less accurate data which might not be useful to us. The second, that the method becomes useless when third party from whom the information is obtained is dishonest, inefficient, or unable to provide correct information. Yes, when we collect some information personally, we may realize that the information is incorrect, but when we are doing it from third party, there is no way to know whether that information collected is honest or not. So that way it becomes difficult to trust such information. So my dear friends, these are the advantages and disadvantages of the indirect inquiry of the primary data. Homework is to write down notes for this tutorial, and next time we will discuss the method of collecting data by questionnaire in dating. So we have completed direct and indirect inquiry method of collecting primary data, and next time we will be discussing the third method of collecting primary data, that is the questionnaire method, in a bit detail, and it will be a bit longer tutorial next time. Stay tuned, see you soon, stay home and stay safe my dear students.